I should have kept my mouth shut that night. That's the thought that crosses my mind now, 58 years later, sitting in my apartment in Bangkok, watching the rain trace patterns against the window. Each droplet following gravity's inevitable path, like the consequences I set in motion on March 17, 1967. But in that distant year, at 23 years old, working as a translator at the King's Boxing Stadium on Ratchadamnoan Avenue, I believed silence meant complicity with lies. I believed truth demanded declaration regardless of consequence. I believed martial arts superiority could be proven through rational argument and cultural authority. I believed a lot of things that a 4-second encounter would dismantle as completely as a wrecking ball dismantles a house of cards. What I'm about to share has never been told publicly, not in interviews, not in documentaries, not in the countless books published about Bruce Lee following his death in 1973. The reason for this silence was not conspiracy or cover-up, but honor. 7 of us witnessed what occurred in that training hall on that Friday afternoon in March, and 7 of us swore an oath that night, our hands pressed together in the traditional Y gesture, foreheads touching briefly in the solemn way Thai culture reserves for the most serious promises, that we would let this story die with us. We made this oath to protect a man's reputation, to preserve dignity in the face of defeat, to honor the courage required to acknowledge truth when truth proves humbling. But 6 of those witnesses are already gone now, their bodies cremated in the Thai Buddhist tradition, their ashes scattered or interred according to family wishes. I am the last living witness to what happened in that training hall, the youngest of the group at 23, now 81 years old, and facing my own inevitable dissolution. And I've decided, after years of internal debate that kept me awake through countless nights, that some truths deserve preservation more than promises deserve keeping. The principles demonstrated in those 4 seconds matter more now than they did then, perhaps because our current era has forgotten nearly everything that moment taught about restraint, respect, and the proper relationship between combat and character. The King's Boxing Stadium occupied 3 floors of a concrete building on Ratchadamnoan Avenue, positioned exactly 4 blocks from the Grand Palace and 2 blocks from the Democracy Monument, geographical proximity that granted the facility a certain prestige despite its weathered exterior and modest dimensions. The building's facade carried the faded elegance common to Bangkok structures erected during the economic optimism of the 1950s, when Thailand's post-war recovery created opportunities for entrepreneurs willing to invest in the ancient combat art that had defined Siamese military prowess for centuries. The ground floor housed administrative offices, ticket windows that opened only on fight nights, and storage rooms containing spare equipment, cleaning supplies, and the accumulated detritus of an operation that had existed continuously since 1954. The air on this level smelled perpetually of mildew and old paper, the combination of tropical humidity and inadequate ventilation slowly deteriorating documents nobody consulted but regulations required be kept. The training floor existed on the 2nd level, a space measuring exactly 82 feet by 63 feet, according to measurements I had taken months earlier while translating facility specifications for an insurance company. Windows ran along the entire eastern wall, 8 large openings without glass panes, only wooden shutters that could be closed during monsoon storms, but otherwise remained open to catch whatever breeze might penetrate Bangkok's oppressive heat. These windows caught morning light in a way that turned the air golden, with suspended dust particles, each mote visible in the slanting rays, creating an almost cathedral-like quality during early training sessions when the air remained relatively still. The floor itself was polished teak wood, boards running east to west in 18-inch widths, darkened by decades of blood, sweat, and the medicinal oils fighters rubbed into sore muscles. In certain areas, particularly the northwest quadrant where most bag work occurred and the southwest corner where sparring matches typically took place, the wood had worn smooth, its grain barely visible, polished to a sheen by the passage of countless bare feet executing pivot steps, shuffles, and the distinctive bounce that characterized Muay Thai footwork. In other sections, particularly near the walls, the original wood texture remained more visible, the grain showing the distinctive patterns that made teak valuable for shipbuilding and furniture construction. Along the northern wall hung 6 heavy bags, each suspended from the ceiling by chains that had been reinforced multiple times over the years as links wore through from constant stress. The bags themselves varied in age and condition. 2 were relatively new, their canvas covers still maintaining the dark brown color of fresh material, their shapes cylindrical and taut. 3 were middle-aged, their covers showing patches where tears had been repaired with thick thread and leather reinforcement, their cylindrical shapes slightly distorted from years of absorbing punishment. The 6th bag, positioned nearest the eastern windows, was ancient, its canvas the color of coffee stains, its shape no longer cylindrical, but vaguely pear-like, bulging at bottom, where fill material had settled over time. This bag's chain creaked distinctively with each impact, a sound slightly higher pitched than the others, creating a rhythmic variation that experienced fighters used to maintain cadence during training rounds. The southern wall featured a shrine to Phra Phrom, the four-faced Brahma deity whose worship had been incorporated into Thai Buddhism, despite its Hindu origins. The shrine occupied a dedicated alcove elevated approximately 4 feet from floor level, constructed of teak wood, matching the flooring, and carved with intricate patterns, depicting mythological scenes and geometric designs representing cosmic order. The 4 faces of Brahma, each carved from a single piece of white stone and painted in traditional colors, gazed in the 4 cardinal directions, representing omniscient awareness and comprehensive protection. Before the shrine stood an offering table where fighters placed jasmine garlands, sweet rice wrapped in banana leaves, incense sticks, and small bottles of Coca-Cola or orange Fanta, the modern beverages having replaced traditional offerings in a syncretism that bothered purists, but seemed perfectly natural to practical fighters, seeking whatever advantage spiritual devotion might provide. The incense burned perpetually, replaced throughout the day whenever the previous sticks exhausted themselves, creating a constant stream of gray smoke that rose toward the ceiling and spread throughout the training hall, mixing with the smell of sweat and liniment to create an olfactory signature that anyone who trained there would recognize immediately, even if blindfolded and transported to the location without warning. The western wall contained doorways leading to the changing rooms, separate facilities for fighters and for paying students, and a small office where I conducted my translation work at a wooden desk positioned to allow me to observe the training floor through a wide opening cut into the wall. This positioning wasn't accidental. The stadium's owner, Kun Prasert, had specifically instructed that the office opening be widened during renovations in 1963 so that I could monitor activities while working, both to facilitate my availability for translation needs and to enable my unofficial role documenting training methodologies and fighter development for his private records. March 17th began as ordinary as any Friday in that season, when heat builds before monsoon rains arrive to break it. The morning training session had concluded, fighters dispersing to their dormitories or the street food stalls on Khao San Road. The afternoon typically brought private training sessions, wealthy Bangkok businessmen paying premium rates for instruction from champions whose names appeared on stadium posters. But this afternoon brought something unprecedented. A visitor whose arrival I didn't understand until much later represented collision between martial philosophies separated by 3,000 miles and centuries of tradition. Somchai Singarat stood 6 feet 1 inch tall, according to medical measurements taken for his professional fighting license, weighed 238 pounds when properly hydrated, and carried a physical presence that dominated spaces through simple occupation of them. These dimensions made him extraordinary among Thai fighters whose frames typically ran compact and economical, optimized for the weight classes between 115 and 160 pounds, where most Muay Thai competition occurred. Somchai's size qualified him for heavyweight division, a category sparsely populated in Thailand, but increasingly relevant as international promotion companies sought Thai fighters who could compete against Western boxers accustomed to larger athletes. He had won 17 consecutive professional Muay Thai matches since beginning his career in 1963, accumulating a record of 17 wins, 0 losses, and 0 draws, with 14 victories coming by knockout and 3 by decision, so dominant the judges' scorecards showed unanimous margins that would have become knockouts if the matches had continued another round. His knockout power derived from exceptional leg strength built through years of kicking banana trees, a traditional conditioning method that progressive trainers had begun abandoning in favor of heavy bag work, but that Somchai's rural upbringing had ingrained as essential practice. The scar tissue on his shins testified to thousands of repetitions against unforgiving hardwood, creating bone density and nerve deadening that transformed his legs into weapons capable of fracturing ribs or breaking femurs. His face showed the cartography of combat, each mark representing a specific fight whose details Somchai could recount with precise recall. The nose had been broken in his fourth professional match against a Burmese fighter who caught him with an upward elbow during a clinch exchange. The bone fracturing with a sound Somchai described as similar to a bamboo stick snapping. The break had been reset by a traditional healer rather than a hospital doctor, resulting in a slightly leftward deviation that improved rather than diminished his appearance, adding character to features that might otherwise have seemed too regular. Scar tissue thickened both eyebrows, the left more prominently than the right. Consequences of cuts opened during different matches and closed between rounds, using a combination of adrenaline injections and metal plates pressed against the wounds by cornermen whose experience in managing bleeding had been accumulated over decades. The thickening created a permanently severe expression even when Somchai's mood was neutral, contributing to the intimidation factor that caused opponents to approach matches with psychological disadvantage already established. His left cheekbone showed a slight depression, visible only when light struck his face from certain angles, a residual effect from an elbow landed by a Cambodian fighter in his 9th professional match. The blow had fractured the zygomatic bone, despite Somchai's attempt to roll with the impact, requiring surgery to prevent permanent vision problems. The surgeon had inserted a small metal plate to stabilize the bone during healing, and that plate remained in Somchai's face, occasionally setting off metal detectors at airports and serving as permanent reminder of the night when his corner had nearly stopped the fight due to swelling that closed his left eye completely before a combination of ice treatment and endurance allowed him to continue. His hands, even at rest, remained slightly swollen at the knuckles, the permanent thickening that comes from striking hard surfaces thousands of times until the body responds by increasing bone density and decreasing nerve sensitivity in a process that essentially sacrifices fine motor control for impact resistance. Somchai could no longer feel temperature variations subtle enough that most people would notice them, could not distinguish textures that required delicate touch, and struggled with tasks requiring precision finger movements. But he could punch concrete walls with full force and feel only dull pressure rather than pain, could grip an opponent's neck during clinch work with crushing force sustained for entire rounds without hand cramping. That afternoon, March 17th, began as ordinary as any Friday during that season when heat builds toward unbearable levels before monsoon rains arrive to break the oppressive accumulation. Bangkok's temperature had reached 34 degrees Celsius by 11 in the morning, and the training hall's lack of air conditioning meant that even at 2 in the afternoon, with most direct sun blocked by neighboring buildings, the interior temperature hovered around 32 degrees, the humidity making the air feel thick enough to require conscious effort to breathe. The morning training session had concluded at 11:30, according to the schedule posted near the shrine, fighters dispersing to their various destinations. Some returned to the dormitory rooms on the 3rd floor, where professional fighters under contract to the stadium lived in conditions that would seem Spartan by contemporary standards, 8 men sharing a space with 4 bunk beds, a single bathroom, and a communal area containing a hot plate for cooking simple meals. Others walked to the street food stalls that congregated on Khao San Road, 3 blocks to the west, where vendors sold pad thai, grilled chicken skewers, mango sticky rice, and the intensely spicy somtam papaya salad that gave the King's Boxing Stadium's ground floor its distinctive smell. The afternoon typically brought private training sessions, arrangements where wealthy Bangkok businessmen or their children paid premium rates for one-on-one instruction from champions whose names appeared on stadium posters advertising upcoming matches. These sessions provided essential supplemental income for fighters whose purses from professional matches, while adequate for survival, fell short of creating financial security. The going rate for private instruction was 100 baht per hour in 1967, equivalent to approximately $2.50 American, but representing nearly a full day's wage for most Bangkok workers. Somchai was scheduled to conduct such a session with the 19-year-old son of a shipping magnate whose business controlled 3 cargo vessels operating between Bangkok and Singapore. The father, Kun Manop, harbored ambitions of toughening his son through martial training, believing that the boy's privileged upbringing had made him soft in ways that would prove disadvantageous when he inherited control of the company and needed to negotiate with dock workers, customs officials, and business rivals who would test his resolve. Whether this theory had merit remained debatable, but it generated steady income for Somchai, who conducted weekly sessions with the boy, despite privately doubting that 3 hours of training per week would transform inherited softness into earned toughness. But the student had called that morning, his voice raspy with what sounded like genuine illness, though Somchai harbored suspicions that hangover rather than infection explained the symptoms. The boy had gone out with friends the previous night to one of the new nightclubs opening in the Sukhumvit area, establishments catering to Bangkok's emerging wealthy class and the foreign tourists who were beginning to discover Thailand as an exotic destination. Whatever the true cause of his incapacity, the cancellation left Somchai's afternoon unexpectedly vacant, a rare occurrence during this busy season when his reputation as rising heavyweight champion created constant demand for his services. He remained in the training hall rather than returning to the dormitory, partly because the third floor's heat and crowding made it less comfortable than the second floor's relative spaciousness and air circulation from the eastern windows, and partly because idle time created psychological discomfort that physical training relieved. Somchai had grown up in rural poverty in Buriram province, the fourth of 7 children born to rice farmers whose annual income depended entirely on monsoon patterns and rice prices, both variables outside their control. Childhood had meant constant work from age 6 onward, either in rice paddies during planting and harvesting seasons, or in the house helping care for younger siblings and maintain the family's modest dwelling. The transition to professional fighting had occurred through a route common in Thai culture, a rural temple's martial arts program identifying his talent at age 11, the abbot recommending him to a Bangkok training camp at age 14, and the camp beginning his professional career at age 18 after 4 years of intensive preparation. Now at age 24, Somchai had been fighting professionally for 6 years, had accumulated enough money to send regular payments to his parents that meaningfully improved their circumstances, and had begun saving toward the long-term goal of opening his own gym once his body could no longer sustain the punishment professional fighting required. But this future-oriented planning existed alongside present-focused training discipline. Somchai approached the ancient heavy bag near the eastern windows, the one whose chain creaked distinctively, and began unwrapping the hand wraps he had put on earlier for the cancelled session. The wraps were cotton strips roughly 2 inches wide and 10 feet long, wound carefully around knuckles, across the back of hands, and around wrists in patterns that provided both compression to stabilize joints and padding to protect bones. Removing them revealed hands showing the callousing and thickening that marked serious practitioners, skin roughened but not yet damaged by the thousands of impacts accumulated over years of training. Bruce Lee entered the training hall with 2 companions, both Chinese men in their 30s wearing casual Western clothing. I would learn later they were students from his school in Los Angeles, accompanying him during a Southeast Asian journey combining personal exploration with demonstration of his developing martial art philosophy. Bruce stood 5 feet 7 inches, according to the measurement taken later that evening, weighed 135 pounds, and moved with an economy of motion that made even walking seem purposeful. He wore dark slacks and a white short-sleeved shirt, his forearms visible and showing muscle definition that seemed unusually pronounced for his relatively slight frame. His hair was cut short, combed back from his forehead, and his eyes moved constantly, taking in details of the space with an intensity that felt almost predatory. The 3 men approached the shrine first, Bruce Lee executing a precise Y gesture before the Brahma image while his companions followed his example. This action caught Somchai's attention immediately, as it would any Thai person observing a foreigner displaying proper cultural respect. Somchai stopped his bag work, unwrapped his hands, and approached the visitors with the cautious friendliness that characterized interactions between martial artists from different traditions. I moved from the office to the training floor proper, anticipating potential need for translation services. The initial exchange proceeded with elaborate courtesy. Somchai introduced himself in broken English. Bruce responded in clear English, explaining his presence in Bangkok and his interest in observing different martial systems. They discussed training methodologies, philosophical approaches to combat, and the technical distinctions between Kung Fu and Muay Thai traditions. Bruce demonstrated genuine curiosity about Muay Thai's devastating elbow and knee techniques, asking specific questions about targeting strategies and power generation mechanics. Somchai reciprocated by inquiring about Wing Chun concepts and Bruce's developing Jeet Kune Do philosophy. For approximately 20 minutes, the conversation maintained this diplomatic character. Then Bruce made an observation that shifted the atmosphere entirely. He commented that while Muay Thai demonstrated impressive power generation and devastating striking, he believed many techniques carried excessive wind-up that created exploitable gaps for faster fighters. He phrased this diplomatically, even academically, positioning it as theoretical analysis rather than criticism. But Somchai's expression changed immediately, the professional courtesy hardening into something colder. Somchai responded that power without wind-up was impossible according to physical laws, that Bruce's Wing Chun techniques might work against other Wing Chun practitioners, but would prove ineffective against a fully committed Muay Thai assault. Bruce accepted this disagreement calmly, suggesting that different martial philosophies naturally produce different conclusions about optimal combat strategies. He began explaining his concept of striking from any position without telegraphic preparation, demonstrating small movements of his fist that traveled mere inches yet generated visible speed. This was when Somchai laughed, not with malice initially, but with genuine amusement at what he perceived as Bruce's naive claims. He stated that techniques without power might land, but would produce no meaningful effect, comparing them to raindrops striking stone. Bruce responded that effectiveness wasn't purely power-dependent, that precision targeting and timing could multiply force beyond raw strength calculations. Somchai's amusement shifted toward condescension. He invited Bruce to strike his abdominal muscles, tensing his core and presenting his midsection as target. Bruce declined, explaining that demonstration outside of genuine sparring context proved nothing about combat effectiveness. The refusal registered as retreat in Somchai's interpretation. His posture shifted subtly, weight distributing differently, shoulders rolling back in a display of physical confidence. He commented that perhaps Bruce's reluctance came from awareness that his techniques lacked sufficient power to produce meaningful impact. Bruce remained calm, reiterating his position that demonstration without proper context created false conclusions. But Somchai pressed further, his tone acquiring an edge that transcended cultural and linguistic barriers. He stated directly that he had felt Wing Chun punches before, that they resembled mosquito bites, irritating but ultimately harmless against a conditioned fighter. The words hung in the air for 3 seconds. I remember counting them, feeling the atmosphere compress with tension that made the spacious training hall suddenly claustrophobic. Bruce's two companions shifted their weight, recognizing something significant had occurred, even if they didn't understand Thai language nuances. Somchai smiled slightly, satisfied that he had finally provoked reaction beyond philosophical deflection. Bruce's response came quietly, almost conversationally. He suggested that perhaps a brief exchange would resolve their philosophical disagreement more efficiently than continued verbal debate. He proposed that Somchai could attack with full commitment, and Bruce would respond appropriately, limiting the engagement to one exchange to minimize injury risk. Somchai's smile widened. He agreed immediately, stripping off his shirt to reveal a torso carrying minimal body fat, abdominal muscles visible in defined segments, chest and shoulders showing the overdevelopment common among fighters who train bag work extensively. The two other witnesses arrived during these preparations. Chakan, the stadium's senior trainer, had been conducting a private lesson on the 3rd floor and came down investigating the voices. Niran, one of Somchai's training partners, had returned early from his afternoon break and entered through the street entrance. Both men recognized immediately that something significant was developing and positioned themselves along the eastern windows where light would provide optimal viewing angles. The space arrangement occurred with minimal discussion. The training floor's center area, approximately 20 feet square, was cleared of equipment. Bruce removed his shoes, standing in dark socks that contrasted against the teak flooring. Somchai performed brief stretching, rotating his shoulders, loosening his neck, shaking out his legs with small bouncing movements. Bruce stood relatively still, his breathing deep and even, his eyes focused on Somchai with unwavering attention. Somchai assumed a traditional Muay Thai stance, left foot forward, weight distributed 60% on the back leg, hands raised in a high guard protecting his face, elbows drawn and covering his ribs. His front foot maintained light contact with the floor, ready to lift for teep kicks or step explosively forward into combinations. Bruce adopted a stance I had never seen before, weight distributed evenly between feet, positioned roughly shoulder width apart, body turned approximately 30 degrees to create a narrower target profile. Lead hand extended forward at chest height, with fingers loosely open rather than clenched in fist, rear hand positioned near his center line, protecting his body's vertical axis. The space arrangement occurred with minimal discussion, but maximum attention to safety and fairness protocols that both men implicitly understood governed informal challenges between martial artists. The training floor's center area, measuring approximately 20 feet square, was cleared of equipment by moving a pair of focus mitts and several sets of hand wraps to the periphery. Bruce removed his shoes with methodical care, untying laces that had been double knotted, placing the shoes precisely side by side near the eastern windows. He stood in dark socks that contrasted sharply against the teak flooring, his feet positioned exactly parallel, his weight distribution carefully neutral as he performed brief rotational movements testing the wood's friction characteristics and identifying any slippery spots that might affect footwork.